With the groan of unseen gates and a surge of cosmic energy, a majestic one-eyed god is revealed upon his throne, radiating a brilliant golden light that pierces the swirling purple void. It began in an ominous void, where a stern, bearded man stood beside a glowing, winged warrior and declared that the time was nigh. As if summoned by their decree, a host of menacing figures erupted in a flash of crimson energy, their shadowy forms led by a radiant woman and a man whose single red eye burned with malice. It began with a cataclysmic declaration, as an ornate hand reached out from a fiery void, commanding the start of Ragnarok. That hand belonged to an imposing, one-eyed old man, whose form erupted with a powerful dark aura as he gave the final, resounding command for everything to begin. Amidst a blinding, ethereal glow, a mysterious white-haired figure sounded a powerful blast from an ornate horn, its call echoing with ancient power. It began with the thunderous sounds of war, where angelic figures descended to clash with demonic monsters and armored titans under a sky fractured by chaotic purple light. As a great city burned below, its skies choked with smoke, a colossal winged being soared above the chaos, its dark silhouette a harbinger of the unfolding apocalypse. It began with the brutal shriek of clashing steel and splintering bone, as armored combatants were engulfed in a desperate melee under a hail of deadly arrows. A sudden, blinding light revealed the source of the menacing growl, a mouth contorted in a snarl bearing a set of monstrous, fang-like teeth. With an ominous, heavy thudding that echoed through the darkness, a colossal, horned monster with glowing red eyes loomed into view, its bellowing rage flanked by a host of smaller, armored fiends. The hulking monster immediately acted on its rage, its powerful form straining as it swung a massive club through the air with a sound like thunder. A deafening crash shattered the air as a monstrous shadow with glowing red eyes struck a helpless figure, the raw force of the blow sending debris flying and triggering desperate shouts for everyone to flee. As the earth thudded and rumbled from the creature's immense weight, a terrified woman desperately shielded a small child from the massive shadow now towering above them. A forceful shove sent the man sprawling to the ground, the sudden violence of the act captured in the woman's wide, shocked eyes. The battle erupted in a blinding flash of power, sending an unknown figure tumbling backward to crash against the ground with a violent splat. A thunderous crash shattered the quiet, and as the dust settled, a woman lay gravely wounded, her blood slowly dripping onto the cold stone. A child's trembling hands immediately gripped the injured limb, their horrified cries for their mother shattering the air in utter disbelief. In a desolate, snow-covered wasteland, a terrified youth clung to a companion, stammering that a monster was heading straight for them. His companion, bloodied and weak, then met his terrified gaze and implored him to forget her and escape while he still had the chance. Pinned beneath the terrifying shadow of a colossal armored figure, a bloodied young woman let out a guttural cry, her entire being focused on the single desperate thought of making it out alive. Looming over the bloodied and distressed woman, the monstrous helmeted figure unleashed a guttural roar as its eyes flared with a terrifying light. From the shadowy rooftops, a lone figure in dark, imposing armor launched into a powerful leap across the sprawling city below. Hurtling through the air, he unleashed a devastating slash that cut a glowing arc of energy through the darkness. It began with a swift, luminous twirl, a brilliant streak of light cutting diagonally through the otherwise calm blue expanse. In a blinding flash of energy, a menacing, armored figure lunged forward, its glowing eyes blazing as it executed a devastating slice through the air. From the silent darkness, a figure of immense power emerged, its armored visage dominated by eyes that burned with an intense, radiant aura. Out of the darkness, a cloaked figure erupted with a deafening swish, unleashing a wide, golden slash of pure energy that sliced through the very air. In a blinding flash, a shadowy figure tore through the darkness, leaving a trail of glowing orange sparks in its wake. Amidst a swirl of kicked-up snow and rock, a wide-eyed, orange-haired youth stood frozen in shock as the massive armored construct collapsed before him with a heavy, final thud. From within a maelstrom of dark energy, a mysterious hooded figure with glowing orange eyes appeared, their chest erupting in a brilliant flash as they urgently commanded the listener to seek safety with their comrades in the rear. That brilliant flash then surged outward with an empowering roar, enveloping the injured woman in a torrent of restorative mystical energy. In the quiet hush of falling snow, a relieved mother clutched her child tightly, bowing to express her profound gratitude to the unseen man who had just saved them. Her heartfelt thanks was cut short by her son's terrified scream as he pointed and identified their savior as the horrifying figure in the black robe. Cloaked in shadows and advanced armor, a mysterious figure revealed a menacing grin, its glowing orange eyes alight with confidence as dark energy tendrils swirled ominously behind them. With an unspoken challenge, they pulled back their hood, the slight smirk on their face illuminated by the shimmering blue energy and electrical sparks that now crackled to life. The battle began in a maelstrom of shadow and steel, where an armored warrior clashed desperately against a monstrous creature with eyes that burned like embers. Amidst a maelstrom of shadow and flame, an armored warrior with glowing eyes brandished his sword, a confident smirk playing on his lips as he asked if it was time to begin. The air tore with a ferocious roar as a horned, red-eyed monstrosity and its nightmarish pack of beasts lunged from the shadows. Standing in their path, a dark-haired figure with striking red and gold eyes met the charge, becoming engulfed in a powerful torrent of radiating flames. As a colossal, flaming beast unleashed its furious roar, a lone warrior stood his ground, the air vibrating with the power of his single word incantation. The air shattered in a brilliant flash as a dark-haired man, his eye burning with golden light, unleashed a torrent of fiery power with a confident smirk. A thunderous explosion of fire and white energy suddenly shattered the calm, revealing a lone, cloaked figure standing untouched at its very center. With a guttural roar, the dark entity unleashed a violent explosion of power, sending one of the combatants hurtling through the air. With a visceral whoomph that echoed in the darkness, an armored warrior unleashed a devastating swing of his greatsword, sending a wave of pure energy hurtling towards a mysterious shadowy figure. It began with a surge of intense, otherworldly energy as two massive, clawed hands emerged from the void to tear open a shimmering blue rift. The battle erupted in a blinding flash of blue energy, its concussive force violently engulfing a crowd of shadowy figures. From a high vantage point, a powerful armored figure with glowing eyes took a heavy step forward, his gaze fixed on the two monstrous, fur-clad enemies lurking below. In a blinding flash of energy that tore through the silence, a monstrous face materialized, its features twisted in pure rage and its eyes glowing with a terrifying blue light. In a cataclysmic explosion of raw power, two heavily armored warriors crashed together, the force of their collision reverberating with a thunderous clang. A tense battle erupted in a blur of violent motion, as a dark-haired warrior wreathed in fire, his eyes glowing orange, unleashed a furious assault on a snarling, monstrous wolf. In a cataclysmic burst of raw power, a monstrous horned figure with furious, glowing eyes hurtled into view, brandishing a massive, jagged rock as its weapon. In a space humming with confrontational energy, a massive, horned warrior stood impassively as a smaller, cloaked figure hurtled directly towards him. Amidst a swirling vortex of violent purple energy, a monstrous horned creature let out a guttural roar, recoiling just as a sword wreathed in flame plunged down to strike. In a sudden, violent eruption of power, a dark-haired figure channeled a searing column of golden energy that detonated in a massive purple explosion. With eyes glowing ominously, a dark-clad figure cut through the chaos, unleashing a violent slash of energy that grievously wounded the horned behemoth before him. Within a sanctum of blinding light, a lone warrior stood cloaked in dark armor, his very presence a vortex of swirling, intense energy that defied the brilliance around him. The air crackled with a mysterious power as one figure's eye blazed with golden light, a silent response to the radiant energy surging from another's core. Wreathed in a golden aura under a blazing sky, a lone sorceress stood defiantly before the colossal, red-eyed beast identified only as a raider. In a world built on a brutal cycle, adventurers hunt down fearsome monsters to obtain the priceless loot they leave behind. With a calm smile and a radiant aura surrounding him, Min Jae-hyun declared his ultimate purpose was to protect humans, earning a look of pure joy from Kim Yo-jun as another figure observed them from a distance. The thought emerged from the darkness, a quiet reflection that while their profession was undeniably hazardous, the world simply called them heroes. In the somber darkness of a lonely room, a solitary figure sat illuminated only by the television's glow, watching the celebrated icons that society expected them to look up to. As darkness swirled around him, a young man with piercing red eyes reflected on the singular, heart-pounding thrill that defined the life of a raider. The tense silence was shattered by the heavy, rhythmic thud of an approaching figure, each forceful step echoing with ominous intent. The ominous rhythm matched the frantic pounding in his own chest, a sensation he recognized as a raider's heart beating its fastest while he gasped for breath amidst a swirling vortex of red energy. A deafening buzz filled the void as a colossal beam of superheated energy tore through the blackness, its surface crackling with raw power. Unleashing a deafening screech of golden energy, the injured swordsman met that raw power head-on, staring death right in the face. A cataclysmic roar of energy erupted from a golden-haired swordsman, his eyes glowing with overwhelming power at the heart of the fiery blast. Elsewhere, the cataclysmic roar of power faded into the gentle murmur of a bustling cafe, where a young woman subtly observed a man absorbed in his work on a laptop. The tense silence of the cafe was violently shattered by the slam of the hand on the counter, where a woman's furious accusation caused a nearby man to flinch. His shock instantly erupted into outrage, his eyes glowing a fierce yellow as he roared back, demanding to know if she was seriously asking him to be a meat shield. As the air grew thick with uncertainty, a bespectacled man in a suit attempted to reframe a dubious offer, reminding the other party of their pressing need for quick cash. A cold sweat broke on his temple as the dark-haired man cursed, a frustrating realization dawning on him that his inclusion in the campaign had been strange from the very start. Across the table sat Umin Zhong, the man from the Raider agency who, as the narrator explained, was the sole distributor of contracts for guildless freelancers like himself. On a bustling city street, a young man's expression was etched with concern as he recalled the initial thrill of being contacted out of the blue by Umin for some long-awaited work. Despair washed over the dark-haired man as he read the job request, realizing it called for him to be a disposable vanguard in an undead-infested dungeon with only a single shield. A thankless fate, he lamented, was always his alone. In a room thick with tension, a man in a suit averted his gaze, sweat tracing a path down his temple as he murmured that the person before him already knew the answer. The quiet hum of the office was broken by a tense negotiation, where one man's pragmatic explanation of the difficult market for brawlers was met with a cold accusation from the hooded figure opposite him of being called a worthless brawler. With a sudden, flustered movement, the bespectacled man in the suit sarcastically apologized for his deliberate manner of speaking before bluntly confirming the accusation. The weight of his world pressed down on a young, bespectacled man, his anxious thoughts echoing the hard truth that in an age of magic, brawlers were deemed too slow, too fragile, and far too undesirable for any real opportunity. In the heat of battle, a hard truth emerged, revealing how mages could safely cast their spells from the back, while the raiders on the front lines bore the scars of every dangerous encounter. It began with the stark, undisputed reality of their world. Mages held a clear and decisive upper hand in any open battle. Sweat beading on his temple, a dark-haired young man with fiery orange eyes stared downward, his pained expression reflecting the grim realization that grit alone was no longer enough in a world that had left brawlers behind. As the world blurred into lines of violent motion, a single, sharp regret pierced his thoughts. He should have become a mage back when he still had the choice. It all began 11 years ago, in his last year of middle school, when a remarkable score on his Awakened aptitude exam granted him a rare opportunity to enter the prestigious Mills Academy of Raider Advancement. The memory surfaced as a stark digital readout, revealing that his aptitude for magic back then had been a staggering 97%, a truth that glowed with undeniable power. The tale begins with Ina Seo, a woman bathed in an ethereal blue light who now stands atop the mage world. A legend whose journey began with a surprisingly modest aptitude score of only 92%. The memory surfaced from the darkness, a sharp and dismissive thought that the staggering 97% probability he'd once faced was nothing short of ludicrous. He was gripped by a familiar anxiety, the memory from the other side resurfacing with a cold sweat. His aptitude for melee fighting had been only 34%. Though other paths may have been open to him, a determined young man stood ready to confront his opponents, having finally made the choice to become a brawler. With a solemn gaze, he inwardly admitted that there had been no ambitious or flashy reason for his choice. In a somber memory cast with deep, separating shadows, a lone figure began to explain that he stood apart because the general attitude towards magic wielders back then was, to say the least, abysmal. The air grew heavy with unspoken contempt as a man watched a woman from behind, his subtle smirk betraying the disdainful thought that her kind were utterly incapable of fighting, their only value lying in the party buffs they supplied. However, the times had shifted, casting brawlers into obsolescence as the public turned its adoration to the mages. Lost in a moment of quiet reflection, a man with striking red eyes considered the life he might have lived, questioning if choosing the path of a mage 11 years ago would have led him to a better fate. As a somber reflection surfaced on the grim finality of a raider's development stopping at 20, a large, dark hand broke through murky depths, leaving a sea of smaller hands to languish below. In the low light of a cafe, one man began a tense negotiation, explaining that he was extending a rare opportunity meant for another raider as a special consideration for the other's difficult circumstances. A solemn memory surfaced from the void, recalling a time when a mage's talents were once the envy of all who sought such power. In the heavy silence, a hand resting on the tabletop clenched into a tight fist, knuckles straining with unspoken tension. Despite his grand aspirations, a stark reality settled in the quiet of his mind. For now, he was nothing more than an unremarkable D-rank brawler. Against a stark, bright void, a solemn man with red eyes and textured skin gazed downward, lost in the bitter reflection of how far he had fallen. The day began with a moment of reluctant resolution as a young man with brown hair and glasses, his face a mask of weary acceptance, finally conceded that he would do it. A heavy, unspoken tension filled the sun-drenched room where two men sat across from one another, their gazes deliberately averted. His gaze drifted away in quiet contemplation, as he internally acknowledged the harsh reality that he never truly had a choice if he wanted to survive in this business. His initial surprise instantly transformed into a radiant smile, and he declared that he was absolutely beaming to hear it. As their tense meeting concluded, the man in the suit finalized their plan for an 8 a.m. rendezvous the following morning, leaving his casually dressed companion to silently question the arrangement, knowing he was already swamped with agency work. As the man in the suit set his mug down with a final clink, he politely refused the other's dismissal, asserting that they both had business at the same place tomorrow and would inevitably see each other then. True to his word, the next day brought them all to a lush forest clearing where a massive blue portal had just torn open with a deafening whoosh, drawing hushed murmurs from the assembled crowd. A gentle breeze rustled through the sun-dappled forest, where a young, well-equipped adventurer took a moment of calm respite against the trunk of a tree. But his respite turned to anger as he gripped his foam, fuming that the bastard Uman had clearly lied about meeting him today. A lone, dark-clad swordsman finally let out a weary sigh, the weight of a broken promise settling upon him as he muttered that such words should never be spoken if one doesn't intend to show up. His disappointment was met with a cold, strategic assessment from a dark-haired man whose striking orange eye betrayed no emotion as he determined that Uman would be better off doing business with a more capable raider. With a silent swoosh, a dark-clad figure moved through the sun-dappled forest, their gaze fixed on a group of armored individuals resting in a clearing below. The observer considered the immense power of the A-rank mage, Uman, finding it baffling that someone so clearly superior to his own D-rank brawler self would waste their time with a minor raider agency. As a dark-haired man's intense golden eye flared with focus, he considered what he would have done, his thought abruptly cut short by a powerful surge. That surge shattered his reality, casting his form as a dark silhouette against a glitching, blood-red void filled with drifting crimson feathers. The scene explodes in a flash of crimson as a face, contorted with rage, emerges from the darkness to furiously brand someone a worthless fool. He absorbed the insult with a chilling silence, his gaze hardening as an ominous power began to flare within his glowing orange eyes. The silence was shattered by a sudden shout of his name, causing Jaehyun to flinch as his eye ignited with a startling orange glow. The source of the shout then materialized in a whoosh of air. A broadly smiling man in full armor who waved enthusiastically, calling out that it was great to see him again. Deep within the forest, a man in dark attire casually scratched his head, confirming to his armored companion that he too had been drawn in by the promise of good pay for a dangerous run. His armored companion's expression grew animated as he began to rant, declaring that jobs like this were all that was left for brawlers and lamenting how kids these days only respect mages who shoot fireballs from the back. With a sword on his back and a deep frown, the red-eyed swordsman dismissed any notion of appearing cool, his thoughts consumed by the gnawing reality that he was on the verge of starvation. In the tense quiet before their mission, a seasoned warrior broke the silence with a comradely nudge, suggesting to his younger, more reserved partner that they watch each other's backs and celebrate with a drink when it was all over. Staring forward with intense orange eyes that betrayed nothing, the dark-haired man skeptically conceded that the idea sounded swell. With a sharp interjection, the armored man shut his eyes, dismissing the claim of having no money by pointing out that he had spotted them before. A sinister scratching sound echoed as a mysterious young man with a sword on his back emerged, his glowing yellow eyes and confident smirk radiating an aura of palpable danger. It started with a cautious peek from the darkness, a single eye straining to understand the danger that lay just beyond. After a moment of tense bargaining, the man in full armor groaned in defeat, reluctantly agreeing to pay while vowing that this would be the absolute last time. Flashing a disarmingly bright smile, the dark-haired man offered a mock apology for being such a burden, privately gloating that his act worked every single time. A brilliant light erupted from a figure standing deep within a lush forest, their voice echoing with an urgent command for everyone to assemble at the dungeon entrance. That command was immediately broadcast, as a Sirius agent announced over his communicator that they had only 30 minutes until entry. Deep within the forest, a sudden dramatic sound brought two armored men and their distant companions to a halt, their bodies tensing as they faced an unseen arrival. As the concerned armored man began to turn away, the quiet swordsman beside him let out a soft sigh, remarking that it was time for him to get ready. A pensive sigh cut through the rustle of leaves as a solitary, dark-haired man leaned against a tree, his attention now fixed on a small electronic device in his hands. With a focused expression, a dark-haired man held a black device, his mind recalling the two crucial things a raider must consider before entering a dungeon. In a sun-dabbled forest charged with anticipation, three armored figures stood as a living example of the first rule, the moment one stumbles upon an unexpected boon. Deep within the oppressive gloom of a dungeon, two injured adventurers stood captivated by the ethereal glow of a treasure chest, a seemingly lucky find that can dull the mind and snuff out all reason in an instant. In a tense moment where caution was cast aside, two armored figures stood frozen as a dark, glistening tendril began to slither from the open maw of an ornate chest. The dungeon's test began with a stark warning to discern a boon from a tragedy, a lesson brutally illustrated as a multi-eyed horror cracked into existence from the void, only to be instantly obliterated in a shower of blood. The tense aftermath of a battle set the scene, where a figure with piercing orange eyes cut short his explanation to urgently shout for Jaehyun, insisting they had to get moving. Deep within a forest surrounded by hooded figures, a knight in full armor broke the quiet, casually teasing their companion for once again being completely absorbed by a smartphone. A wide smirk spread across his face as he remarked on this familiar pre-dungeon ritual, playfully guessing if the photo held his companion's girlfriend. Amidst a backdrop of sunlit foliage, a mysterious man with dark hair and a sly smirk held a black device at his hip, dismissing any inquiry by coolly stating it was nothing. The story opens on a young man with dark hair and striking orange eyes, a confident smirk playing on his lips as he holds a sleek, mysterious device. A wave of nostalgia washed over him as he stared at a cherished photo on his phone, recalling the moment he promised his smiling mother he would be back before she knew it. Deep within a vibrant, sun-drenched forest, a mysterious contingent of robed and armored figures gathered before a shimmering blue portal, the air thick with unspoken purpose. In a vast, ancient hall bathed in an ominous green light, a catastrophic tremor shook the very stones as robed figures stood witness to the world crumbling around them. Surrounded by a maelstrom of spectral warriors, an unknown figure erupted in a furious roar, its eyes blazing with white-hot rage. In the heart of a frantic battle, a commander raised his staff, his voice cutting through the din as he desperately ordered the front line to straighten their shields and hold the formation fast. Amidst the escalating urgency of battle, a furious commander berated his wavering subordinates, ordering them to hold their ground at any cost under the cold, silent gaze of another armored figure. As a monstrous, glowing hand lunged towards him with a terrifying whoosh, the man with fiery orange eyes recoiled in alarmed disbelief, finding the sudden attack completely absurd. In a blinding surge of divine light and arcane fire, three robed figures chanted a powerful incantation, calling upon the powers of Alfheim and Surt to incinerate their enemies. With a deafening roar, a swirling vortex of raw, fiery energy tore through the very air, a mysterious hand emerging from its incandescent center. Out of the silent darkness, a cataclysmic vortex of raw power erupted with a deafening roar, unleashing a blinding torrent of red and gold energy. In a cataclysm of blinding light, a warrior with blazing orange eyes brandished their sword, flanked by shadowy allies as they faced an overwhelming power. The silent assault began as a lone figure, their back to the viewer, unleashed a cataclysmic blast of energy from a staff that tore through the ranks of armored soldiers in a thunderous explosion. From a swirling vortex of particles, an intense entity of pure light and fire erupted into existence with a powerful, all-consuming roar. The air crackled with tense energy, forcing one of three figures to raise a glowing shield against the fizzling, uncontrolled surge. In a wash of brilliant, warm light, a mysterious young man with fiery orange eyes turned slowly as glowing particles swirled around him. A brilliant light shone down on the core members of the Yusung Guild, a new group of mages who had already proven their formidable power through numerous challenges. Amidst a swirling vortex of fiery embers, a man with dark hair stared forward, his gaze intense and his eyes glowing with an otherworldly orange light. A wave of relief washed over him as he concluded that, with his allies here, he wasn't going to die. In the depths of a stone chamber, a silent gathering of armored individuals watched as a vibrant green flame erupted from a broken pedestal, consuming the air with a hungry, gurgling sound. In a moment of overwhelming disgust, a soldier in tactical gear let out a strangled cry as he frantically wiped at the drool coating his chin. In the soft glow of a holographic screen, two weary warriors took a much-needed rest, one of them breaking the contemplative silence to ask with a sigh of relief if only the final boss remained. Bathed in the pixelated blue glow of a holographic interface, an armored warrior stared down with a heavy heart, lamenting that if he had known his age would catch up to him like this, he would have worked much harder to level up. With a sword strapped to his back and orange eyes glowing with conviction, a dark-haired man confidently reminded his companion of their own strength, pointing out that they were still in their prime and at a higher level than he was. With the dungeon cleared, one of the men turned to his companion to ask about loot drops, remarking that he'd found nothing useful himself in a dungeon of only A rank. In the ethereal glow of a holographic interface, a pensive warrior in dark armor conceded his uncertainty, resolving to now look through everything he had obtained. Putting his uncertainty aside, he began a focused search, swiping his gloved hand across the luminous interface to sift through his acquisitions. From the enveloping darkness, a thought suddenly sparked, its fiery intensity mirrored in a single, questioning orange eye. That questioning spark was instantly met with a disorienting assault of digital glitches, prompting a fragmented cry of confusion at the incomprehensible, pixelated world. A sharp ping cut through the tense silence, drawing the unwavering gaze of a dark-haired figure whose eye glowed faintly as he watched a bright, glitching interface. An instant later, a crippling throb of pain shot through his skull, forcing him to let out a strangled groan. In a moment of suffocating tension, a man with glowing crimson eyes flinched, his mind racing as he demanded to know what had just sliced through the air. Instead of an answer, a sudden jarring chime echoed through the air as a holographic notification materialized before his distressed eyes, confirming the download of the AESIR system. The digital world vanished in an instant, replaced by a silent void where a glowing blue system alert declared the critical failure of the ESR network and the temporary interruption of all user connections. A wave of concern washed over an unseen operator as a stark message cut through the darkness, questioning if the vital AESIR system had just gone offline. From the enveloping darkness, a voice steeped in wonder confessed to having never witnessed anything like this before. A sharp, digital chime cut through the silence as a holographic warning materialized, its stark text declaring that an unknown error had caused the critical rebooting process to fail. In the glow of 3 holographic screens, a dark-haired man stared with mounting concern, questioning what could be happening now that the system's reboot had inexplicably failed. In an ethereal void, a low whirring sound grew as countless glowing green orbs coalesced around the silhouette of a mysterious figure. As a mysterious voice echoed its command through an endless void, a brilliant green beam of light pierced the darkness, beckoning an unseen traveler to follow. The battle ignited with a sharp, unseen impact that rocked the dark-haired man, his glowing red eyes widening in stunned alarm as sweat beaded on his face. In the heat of a desperate struggle, a sudden chime signaled a profound change as the dirt-streaked young man's eye ignited with an intense orange light. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a piercing digital alarm as the Acer system's screens flared to life, announcing that an unknown entity had breached its defenses and a desperate restoration attempt was now underway. A discordant chime and a fizzle of static suddenly announced the system's catastrophic failure. His face bearing the subtle marks of a recent clash, a young swordsman with a burning red-orange eye was left to ponder the identity of the unknown entity and the origin of the mysterious voice he had just heard. Suddenly, an unseen light illuminated his worried face, prompting him to mutter whether he was supposed to follow its source. Surprised by the sudden disturbance, the armored man turned to the back of Min Jae-hyun and asked what he had just done. He averted his gaze, his glowing eye flickering with anxiety as he began to stammer out an explanation. As an otherworldly orange light blazed from within their eye, an unknown figure stared upward, lost in the memory of a mysterious voice that once commanded them to follow the light. An eerie green light pulsed from a mysterious orb, its low whirring sound cutting through the silence as it completely obscured the face of the one who held it. The day began with a thunderous whoosh as a colossal figure, seen only from behind, brandished a glowing axe that showered 2 smaller onlookers in an overwhelming torrent of green light. In a sudden, heart-stopping moment, a young swordsman stared in disbelief, his right eye flaring with an ominous orange light as he struggled to comprehend the sight before him. In the profound darkness of an unknown space, surrounded by faint, scattered blue lights, a single question emerged. Was this the light that had been promised? It began in an endless, misty void, where immense, glowing shapes of green and yellow drifted like silent, ethereal gods among distant specks of light. The cosmic expanse then vanished, replaced by the concerned face of an armored man who urged his companion to lie down, remarking that they looked unwell. Visibly shaken by an event only he seemed to perceive, the dark-haired man offered a strained assurance that he was perfectly fine, his anxious gaze silently pleading for someone else to acknowledge what had just happened. A violent whoosh tore through his senses, plunging his mind's eye into a dark, desolate landscape littered with debris and glowing motes of light. It began with a nervous swallow and a single drop of sweat as the anxious, dark-haired figure conceded that the situation might be worth investigating. An unspoken urgency filled the air as the dark-haired swordsman abruptly turned to leave, simply assuring his concerned, armored companion that he would not be gone for long. It was a moment of absolute focus, where a young man with disheveled hair and burning orange eyes held his breath, a single drop of sweat betraying the immense strain he was under. Deep within a vast cavern, the oppressive darkness was shattered by a brilliantly glowing orb on the ground, its powerful hum captivating the solitary armed figure who stood before it in awe. The investigation led deep into a cavern where an otherworldly light pulsed from the rugged walls, compelling a lone figure in tactical gear to reach out towards the source of the strange energy. The glow of a holographic interface pierced the darkness, revealing a gloved hand's desperate attempt to access a status window, only for a critical error message to confirm the Acer system was down. Deep within a dimly lit cave, a man in dark armor stared into a glowing blue interface, concluding with quiet resignation that it was no longer of any use. Surrounded by the ethereal glow of holographic interfaces, a lone swordsman contemplated his options when a sudden chime announced a new notification. A sudden electrical crackle shattered the digital silence as holographic alerts flared to life, warning of a partial data corruption and initiating an emergency reboot into safe mode. Leaning wearily against a cold, rocky wall, a dark-haired adventurer sighed in frustration, wondering aloud what was wrong with the glowing holographic interfaces that hovered stubbornly before him. Deep within a mysterious, dark void, glowing orbs cast an ethereal gleam as a voice pondered the unprecedented system failure, recalling how it had remained stable for 17 years, ever since they first became an awakened. Lost in thought amidst a shimmering darkness, a young man with intense orange eyes came to a chilling realization. The strange voice from before was undoubtedly linked to the catastrophic system failure. His fears were instantly confirmed as corrupted system alerts flared to life, announcing the catastrophic shutdown of the Acer system and its breach by an unknown entity. Within a sacred space shimmering with golden light, a colossal, divine figure gazed down upon a cloaked warrior who held a formidable axe, while his two companions watched from below in silent reverence. It began in a smoky void, where a brilliant, pulsating light throbbed with the echo of a strange voice that urged him to follow. Before the glowing entrance to a mysterious cavern, a dark-haired man with piercing orange eyes voiced his theory to a small armored figure, suggesting that the Acer system itself was undergoing a transformation. The tale begins with the emergence of the Acer system, a powerful order named for the gods of Asgard, the pantheon of the mighty Odin and Thor, whose origins were shrouded in Norse mythology. This system was the final saving grace for humankind, which had fallen deep into the pit of despair. The story begins 2 decades earlier, with a lone ship gliding peacefully across a vast, sun-drenched ocean. But that peace was shattered as the ship was violently swallowed by a raging storm, an event that would mark the beginning of the infamous Year of Catastrophe. It began with a cataclysmic rupture in the heart of the Pacific Ocean, where a never-before-seen tree of colossal scale tore through the surface, casting a foreboding shadow over the world. What began as a sprout just half a day prior had become a colossal luminous tree, its impossible growth culminating in branches that consumed the entire sky within 9 days. The arrival of a mysterious phenomenon fractured humanity, with many decrying it as a sign of the end times while others celebrated its advent as a promise of blessings to come. In a vast, hallowed hall, light streamed through a magnificent stained glass window depicting a glowing tree, its sacred silence broken only by a solemn voice beginning to reveal its true name. The solemn voice completed its revelation, identifying the sacred image as Yggdrasil, the fabled world tree of myth. As the 9th day of the tree's maturing arrived, the world seemed to hold its breath in tense anticipation. A terrible calamity fell upon the world as colossal monsters erupted from the chaos, their roars shaking the very foundations of the earth as they began to unleash a series of cataclysms on an unprecedented scale. Under a sky scorched orange by ruin, the age of monsters began as merciless fiends tore through civilization, halving the global population and condemning the survivors to the slow horrors of famine and disease. Among these horrors, monstrous wolf-like beasts with glowing red eyes tore through flesh and bone with a sickening crunch, their attacks swift and merciless. Amidst a world consumed by fiery desolation, a lone silhouetted figure stood defiantly against the horizon, heralding the desperate final hour when all hope seemed utterly lost. Then, with a single, determined step, the figure broke their defiant stance and began to advance into the heart of the inferno. In the warm, dim light of an unknown space, a tense confrontation erupted between 2 savage, wolf-like beasts, their low growls culminating in a sharp snap of bared fangs. Just as all seemed lost in the suffocating darkness, a single ray of hope pierced through, revealing the subtle, knowing smile of a blonde-haired man emerging in a blaze of golden light. With a thunderous dash, a powerful wolf-like beast streaked across the fiery landscape, its form a blur of pure, unbridled speed. Its ferocious dash culminated in a snarling leap towards the man, who instantly countered by unleashing a torrent of dark, glowing purple energy. The tale of the first awakened being began in a maelstrom of dark energy, as a lone figure unleashed a devastating magical strike against a snarling, monstrous wolf. From a swirling vortex of pure, dark energy, a being of legend was born, a smirking, blonde-haired man who, it was said, possessed the very powers of a god. The holographic screen bathed a nervous character in its glow, its text explaining the emergence of the awakened and illustrating the violent purpose of the monster-hunting raiders in a fiery tableau. The story began with a quiet reflection on the Acer system, the legendary tool that aided the heroes of the age, as a lone swordsman stood silhouetted against a shimmering void. Amidst a void of floating, luminous orbs, a pensive, dark-haired man voiced his deep-seated fear that any great change to the Acer system, regardless of its cause, would surely spell disaster for them all. In the profound darkness of a forgotten chamber, two pedestals suddenly roared to life with a swish, unleashing brilliant emerald flames that illuminated the swirling motes of dust. From the oppressive darkness, a heavy, armored foot stepped into a lone circle of light, its impact echoing with ominous intent. His gaze lifted from the illuminated ground to a colossal, ornate doorway glowing with mystical green energy, the sight so overwhelming he could only wonder aloud at its impossible scale. It began with a moment of sheer disbelief as a young man with golden eyes stared at an unfolding event, sweat beading on his brow as he denied the impossible reality before him. Against a glowing, ominous background, a man's face, slick with sweat, broke into a sinister smirk as a palpable shudder of anticipation coursed through him. Their long journey through the darkness ended abruptly before a massive, ornate gate styled like a sword, its glowing eyes seeming to fix upon them as the thunderous realization dawned that they had found a treasure gate. An image of a fabled treasure gate appeared, a simple wooden door surrounded by a mountain of gold, explained as an exceedingly rare phenomenon in high-level dungeons that leads to hidden chambers overflowing with loot. It began with a simple system explanation, revealing that these coveted prizes normally held either special items or exceedingly rare crafting reagents. Before a glowing treasure gate humming with untold power, an armored man reached out with a confident smirk, his thoughts consumed by the knowledge that the items within were worth millions, and that was a conservative estimate. Within a space shimmering with magical energy, a determined figure with glowing red eyes focused intently, his mind set on the ambitious goal of acquiring items of A rank or higher. As golden light fractured the darkness, a voice roared with triumph, celebrating the long-awaited end of a tedious existence. Dripping with sweat in a moment of sheer desperation, he prayed to any god that might be listening for an item of A rank or higher, his plea answered by the creak of a mysterious door swinging open to reveal an awe-inspiring, ethereal world. With a deafening roar, the world dissolved into a maelstrom of light and sound, violently pulling a lone figure through a chaotic, warping vortex. Deep within the dungeon's oppressive darkness, a lone figure with piercing orange eyes initiated a scan, his initial disbelief giving way to awe as he confirmed the existence of a place he'd long considered a mere urban legend. In the silent void of a star-dusted cosmos, a towering vessel suddenly ignited with a powerful hum, unleashing a blinding, energetic light. A dark-haired swordsman with striking orange eyes gave a confident smile, certain that he had finally found the very item he was searching for. Having risked everything to stand before the monumental, glowing structure, the armored figure reached out, determined to see if the gamble had been worth it. With a final, desperate push, he strained to bridge the last few inches, his fingertips nearly grazing the volatile, swirling energy. It began with a mysterious gleam, as immense golden power crackled to life in an outstretched hand. As a result, a cascade of glowing notifications confirmed that limited system functionalities had been restored and a new equipment item obtained, concluding with a prompt to view the item's details. Bathed in a brilliant golden glow, a brown-haired man smirked with the conviction that things were finally looking up. In the silent void of a system crash, a golden grid flickered back into existence, heralding a wave of profound relief as a crucial power returned at just the right time. As the world itself seemed to shimmer with golden fortune, a quiet thought surfaced: when it rains, it truly pours, but in the best way imaginable. That downpour of fortune then coalesced in his palm with a brilliant flash, revealing the world's only mythic tier item, Odin's Lost Eye, a soul-bound artifact capable of deciphering runes and completely nullifying magic. In a sudden flash of light, a system window materialized before an unseen hero, its text detailing the astonishing acquisition of a mythic tier item known as Odin's Lost Eyes, and eliciting a sharp, incredulous gasp. Without a moment's hesitation, the shadowy hero swiped through the glowing interface, the swift motion kicking up an aura of power that glinted off the sword on their back. In a sudden, overwhelming flash of light, a man's vibrant orange eyes widened in shock as faint blue holographic patterns began to materialize before him. With a sudden chime, the air crackled as a glowing blue system window materialized, detailing the immense power of a newly awakened EX tier skill, Absolute Calculation. In a sudden flash of blue light, a system window materialized before him, detailing the unbelievable power of a new skill called Absolute Calculation. A confident smile played on a brown-haired man's lips as he recalled that the most valuable item ever sold at the auction house was a mere S tier, which had still immediately drawn bids in the tens of millions of dollars. The world's economy revolved around a single, undeniable truth. Mage items were in such high demand they effectively had no price ceiling. It was a truth one man now understood intimately as he clenched his fists in a triumphant flash, realizing he had just acquired one of the most priceless objects in existence, a mythic tier item. From the profound silence, a single emphatic truth resonated, proclaiming the object to be the only one of its kind. With a determined grin and a fire of rebellion in his eyes, he swore to himself that his days as a disposable meat shield for smug guild members were over. From the darkness, a voice roared with a mix of exhaustion and triumph, proclaiming that the grueling life of a raider was finally over. With glowing yellow eyes fixed on the shimmering dark artifact, he succumbed to temptation, reasoning that such a once-in-a-lifetime find had to be tried on at least once before being sold. In a heart-stopping moment, a blaring system warning filled his vision, declaring that Odin's lost eye would become permanently soulbound upon equipping, forcing him to scream in panic to cancel the irreversible action. Collapsing onto the glowing floor of a vast, silent hall, the dark-armored warrior finally let out a shaky breath, overcome with relief at having narrowly avoided ruining a mythic item on himself. With a brilliant flare of magical energy, a smug stranger held the newly acquired artifact, deciding he had no need to equip it when it could easily be sold for billions on the black market. It began as a thought in the silent darkness, a resolute decision that despite having found an incredible item, the life of a dungeon crawler was no longer desired. As a shimmering orb of blue energy fractured within a gloved hand, its wielder stared out at the futuristic cityscape, lamenting that being well past the age of 20 meant they could no longer level up. Before a grand ornate pedestal, a dark-haired swordsman reached out a hand, his touch confirming the somber realization that such an item would be wasted on him. Amidst a cascade of glitching red pixels signaling a total system shutdown, a disembodied voice registered the catastrophic event as an unprecedented variable, a phenomenon never before witnessed. It began with the quiet, unsettling trickle of a strange red fluid, a sight that brought with it the familiar and unwelcome resignation to another unexpected turn of events. In a world where dungeons are a grim reality, a fiery sky burns over treacherous grounds, a constant reminder that for any raider who dares to tread here, anything can happen. This chaos, however, is governed by a simple rule, as all unexpected situations are generally divided into two categories. High above a sea of clouds, a lone warrior stood on a grand platform, the whispering wind, a reminder of luck and tragedy as he resolved that it was time to return. Meanwhile, an armored man waiting for him tried to brush off the delay, nervously assuring himself that the warrior would surely be back any second now as panic began to creep in. In the middle of reassuring a cloaked figure about an impending arrival, an armored man abruptly turned, exclaiming with surprise as the subject of their conversation appeared before them. As Min Jae-hyun trudged solemnly into the distance, a lone, concerned voice called out his name, trying to break through his heavy retreat. Amidst the tense anticipation of an impending event, a serious-looking young swordsman with striking orange eyes turned toward an urgent shout demanding he join his comrades before they started. In the tense quiet of a vast cavern, a figure in a blue robe coldly accepted the apologies of two subordinates bowing before him, admonishing them for their unauthorized exploration and warning them never to make such a mistake again. In the tense stillness, a blonde-haired warrior and a brown-haired observer watched from behind as a distant, robed figure raised a staff that pulsed with an ominous light. A heavy tension filled the air as an anxious figure glanced sideways at the somber warrior standing before them, whose sheathed sword only added to their gloomy and intimidating presence. As a metallic gloved fist slammed into a crimson surface with shocking force, the attacker's casual attempt to tell Jae-hyun to forget what happened was cut short by a sudden, sharp surprise. Bathed in a soft, ethereal glow, a dark-haired man offered a reassuring smile to the concerned Myung-ho, laughing as he insisted there was nothing to worry about. In a sudden, friendly gesture, a man with a distinctively textured face turned to his armored companion and insisted on buying the drinks for the evening, leaving the other man to stammer out a surprised acceptance. A tense quiet was broken by the steady march of a lone, shield-bearing warrior advancing on a host of shadowy figures, an act observed with grave concern by a fellow soldier. Utterly perplexed by his companion's strange behavior, an armored knight scratched his head, wondering if the man had taken a nasty blow on the way back. The air grew heavy with tension as a dark-haired man took a deliberate step forward, his advance watched with profound concern by a knight in the background. Casting a wary glance aside, the young man with dark, shaggy hair and a single glowing orange eye felt a wave of relief, hoping he hadn't aroused any suspicion. Against the ominous crimson glow of the dungeon, a dark-haired man explained to his two shadowed companions that they were in a lawless place where anything that happened would remain forever sealed. As his companion watched with a grim expression, the man understood that to let everyone know he had obtained such a valuable item would be akin to forfeiting his life. As the dungeon echoed with the splintering crack of a sudden impact, a calm, strategic voice cut through the tension, reminding everyone that there was no need to rush. They just had to stick to the plan. Amidst a tense gathering of armed figures on cracked earth, a single, intense orange eye betrayed a man's cautious resolve. His only priority was to keep his head down and simply do his job. With a deafening crack, reality itself seemed to splinter apart in a web of blinding light. With the battle line finally secure and the air crackling with anticipation, the commander issued the momentous order to advance, shattering the fragile calm. As a fiery explosion engulfed a hooded figure, a man with burning orange eyes let out a guttural roar, charging headfirst through the chain of devastating impacts. Amidst a chaotic burst of energy, a shielded figure was sent skidding violently across the ground, crying out in utter confusion at the unfolding pandemonium. The world dissolved into a violent blur as a man with glowing red eyes crashed into the ground, his mind reeling as he tried to understand what had just happened. With a sudden hiss of chaotic purple energy, a dark-haired figure found himself sprawled on the ground, his eyes wide with alarm. Without warning, a cloud of noxious purple gas swept over the figures, and one of them began to choke violently while demanding to know what the suffocating haze was. It began in a choking purple mist, where a gloved hand clamped down on the face of a figure with a single glowing red eye as its owner identified the toxic haze as poison fog. Engulfed by a toxic purple mist that promised certain death with prolonged exposure, a lone figure struggled to rise, their mind screaming with the urgent need to escape. In a flash of menacing purple energy, an imposing figure charged towards a stunned Jaehyun, whose name echoed as a desperate voice screamed for him to run. A mysterious purple fog suddenly enveloped the area, causing an armored man to cry out in terror that they had to flee the dangerous mist immediately. Emerging from the shadows, a mysterious masked figure with glowing orange eyes gave a silent, definitive nod, a faint purple aura pulsing around him as the hilt of a weapon glinted over his shoulder. In a chaotic instant, a masked figure with a single glowing red eye cried out a desperate warning for everyone to flee, a command punctuated by the sudden, brutal slash of their sword and a spray of crimson. That sudden violence froze another onlooker in place, their horror reflected in wide, reddish-brown eyes that peered out from behind a dark-gloved hand. In a flash of unseen violence, an armored knight looked down in stunned disbelief, his final sensation the slow drip of blood from the glowing blade now protruding from his chest. Reacting to the mortal wound, he violently spewed a torrent of blood, his last coherent thought a choked cry from Yanho. The brutal battle reached its climax as a dark-haired swordsman plunged his blade through the chest of an armored foe who stumbled back as blood erupted from the devastating wound. The intense confrontation reached its brutal end with a sickening thud as a sword plunged through the warrior's chest, his glowing orange eye widening in shock. It began with the sudden, deafening thud of a heart as a young man's bloodshot eyes flew wide in sheer, unadulterated terror. The world dissolved into a black, blood-spattered void, leaving only the single, overwhelming thought that they had to run. In a blur of desperate motion, feet pounded against the ground, each step punctuated by the strained, heaving breaths of a man on the brink of collapse. The quiet was violently shattered as a massive explosion tore through the sky, its blinding light revealing one man staring up in shock as a shadowy, staff-wielding figure stood just beside him. In response to the blast, a dark-haired warrior in a martial uniform skidded sharply across the ground, his body low and ready for combat. As a blinding flash of light erupted through the ruins, a lone figure was cast to the ground, enveloped by a noxious fog that swiftly filled the once grand halls. An instant later, a powerful shockwave tore through the fog at incredible speed, its passing marked by a deafening zoom. As the world plunged into darkness, a heavy silence was broken only by the promise that something more was about to unfold. Amidst the carnage, a blood-spattered knight stared in wide-eyed horror, his grip tightening on a glowing sword as he whispered in anguish of his murdered allies. In the suffocating silence, the only sounds were a frantic heartbeat and ragged breaths as a lone figure, drenched in sweat, fought to remain standing. With his heart hammering against his ribs, a lone survivor was struck by the horrifying realization that this massacre wasn't a monster's doing, but a calculated strike by dungeon hitmen, leaving him trapped and wondering if the only way out was another deadly ambush. In the tense aftermath of a recent struggle, a scratched swordsman let out a weary sigh, willing himself to get a hold of his nerves, for now was not the time to panic. That resolve solidified in an instant, his face contorting with strained effort as he muttered that anyone who thought they could snatch this item from him was sorely mistaken. Consumed by a nameless dread in the oppressive darkness, a young man's face glistened with sweat as incoherent mumbles escaped him, the only sound in his suffocating turmoil. His turmoil was shattered by the soft, shuffling sound of footsteps, drawing his terrified gaze toward a hooded figure materializing from the shadows. The air thrummed with raw power as a colossal golden blade materialized, crackling with electrical energy and reflecting an unshakable determination in its wielder's eye. With a deafening roar, that blade descended upon its armored target, erupting in a cataclysmic explosion that tore a strangled cry of pain from the figure. As dust and debris swirled around him, a young man with a dirt-streaked face and a solemn expression snatched his sword from its sheath, tapping it lightly as he locked his gaze onto a shadowy figure emerging from the chaos. From the enveloping darkness, the figure's voice cut through the silence, remarking with a hint of admiration that he was, indeed, tough as nails. Deep within the shadows, an ominous presence emerged, its hooded face cast in an eerie orange light that revealed a knowing smirk. A sudden, fiery orange light washed over everything, catching the alarmed expression of a man with intense red eyes as he called out for Uman in disbelief. From the oppressive darkness, a hooded figure emerged, his glasses glinting over eyes that glowed with a menacing yellow light as a sinister grin spread across his face. That sinister grin widened with absolute confidence as he ominously reminded them of the promise he had made. Amidst a storm of crackling energy, a hooded figure with a sinister smile and glowing red eyes extended a powerful hand, confirming with menacing certainty that he would be seeing them today. He shifted his weight with a confident shuffle, casually raising a hand as he reminded them of the promise he had just made. A sinister smirk crept across the face of a mysterious figure in a dark hoodie and glasses, his quiet snicker confirming his prediction that he would indeed be seeing his target today. Against a backdrop of shimmering green energy, a lone, wounded swordsman looked back over his shoulder, his tense expression revealing the desperate weight of the name he uttered. The scene opened within a hazy, ethereal mist, where a dark-haired swordsman with glowing orange eyes leveled his blade and demanded to know if he had finally found the one behind everything. As an unseen voice cut through the silence, demanding to know if they were the one responsible for the deadly fog and the attack on Yusan, a wide-eyed figure in a hoodie looked up in utter shock. In a moment of quiet tension, a figure could barely conceal their secretive grin, a single bead of sweat betraying their carefully controlled facade. In an ominous confrontation, a hooded figure with glinting glasses extended a hand, his sinister smirk punctuated by the declaration that someone was guilty as charged. In the suffocating quiet, a horrifying truth dawned, causing a shudder to rack an unseen figure whose orange eyes flew wide with abject terror. Overwhelmed by this horrifying truth, the figure pressed a blade against their own bleeding arm, desperately trying to assess the situation while questioning Squeeze's motive. Shrouded in a hazy green light, a mysterious figure in a hoodie and glasses offered a simple, nonchalant explanation for his actions. He was merely fulfilling a contract for a client. Peering over his dark-framed glasses, he then added with a cold focus that there was also a long list of people with grudges against Yusan. It was in the heat of a struggle, sweat and grime marking his features, that a resolute young man gritted his teeth, finding the recent arrogance of others to be entirely expected. From the isolated depths of the dungeons, a new breed of predator known as contract killers emerged. Shadowy figures who capitalized on the chaos, much like the menacing specter with glowing eyes looming from a blood-red void. As an unseen observer remarked on how murderers could strike their victims with impunity, the grim aftermath of the Yusong Guild's latest tragedy unfolded across the cold stone floor. In the cold aftermath of a brutal confrontation, an armored warrior lay motionless on a tiled floor, their death officially explained away as a case of an assailant exploiting a loophole in the system. With a furious cry, a warrior with eyes blazing with power unleashed a devastating wave of energy from his blade, forcing a distant hooded figure to recoil from the overwhelming assault. Bathed in the overwhelming glow of a swirling blue aura, a lone man was struck by the sudden, terrifying realization that challenging this opponent was utterly impossible. A confident smirk played on the face of the young mage Yuman, whose prodigious talents as an A-ranker in the nation's top 2% were being recounted while a faint green aura pulsed behind him. In a desolate landscape bathed in an eerie glow, a lone raider staggered forward, consumed by the realization that he was merely an average D rank, neither exceptional nor incompetent. Amidst a tense standoff, a cold sweat beaded on the warrior's brow as he gripped his sheathed sword, the chilling realization dawning on him that his enemies never planned to kill him and that his only hope lay in biting his tongue and remaining silent. Trapped in the suffocating tension, a lone figure's orange eyes glowed with fear as he realized that with Acer down, making a run for it would be a fatal risk. Gazing over a field heavy with loss, a lone warrior steeled himself, acknowledging the cowardly nature of his plan but seeing no other way to avenge the comrades who fell beside him. The briefing began with a confident knight in gleaming plate armor, who gestured with an open hand as he specifically highlighted Myungho's importance. Across a desolate and glowing landscape, a man stared at a distant hooded figure, crushed by the sobering reality that he was utterly powerless against him as he desperately thought of Uman. A solemn figure in a hooded jacket vowed to forget the day's events, declaring that the world born from Yggdrasil's emergence held no compassion for the weak. The air crackled with tension as one man watched helplessly, his fist clenched, while a figure radiating immense power finally called out to Jaehyun. A cataclysmic battle erupted between two figures amidst a storm of fire and explosive energy, as one of them began to explain a crucial, game-changing fact. The silence was shattered by a faint trickle and a sudden thud, startling a young, injured man whose glowing orange eyes flared within the vibrant, fiery energy enveloping him. Wide with alarm, his orange eyes stared into nothing, the sting of a fresh cut on his cheek, a stark reminder that a moment's hesitation would have meant certain death. In a tense standoff, a bloodied man's fiery orange gaze locked onto the chilling, wide sneer of an opponent concealed behind dark glasses. His hand began to glow with golden energy as he pointed forward, sinisterly declaring that he had a secondary target to dispose of that day. It began with a deafening roar as a blinding surge of golden energy erupted from an outstretched hand, crackling with raw and untamed power. That untamed power immediately detonated in a series of concussive booms, forcing a wounded, brown-haired man to dive desperately away from the expanding shockwave. In the heart of a blinding golden energy, a lone warrior, his face smeared with blood and sweat, clenched his jaw as a guttural curse of frustration tore from his throat. Determined to escape the desperate situation, the hooded figures snapped their fingers, unleashing a powerful flash of golden energy that erupted around them. Sent flying by a devastating wave of golden energy, the injured raider desperately questioned why he, a mere D-rank nobody, was being singled out by his impossibly calm attacker. As golden energy crackled before a mysterious, smirking figure, the silent, terrified thoughts of an unseen target echoed, wondering who they had wronged to now be facing death. In a moment of blinding pain and desperation, an injured man with blazing orange eyes struggled against a powerful grip, his mind racing for a way to escape. Out of the darkness, a figure materialized, their face a canvas of blood and fury centered on a blazing orange eye that fixed on an unseen presence as they rasped out a single, demanding question. In a void of oppressive darkness, a sudden surge of crimson energy erupted with a visceral roar as an unseen mind reeled with the terrifying question of who could possibly want them dead. The world itself seemed to quake as a menacing face emerged from the darkness, its eyes burning with an intense orange light. Amidst a chaotic, glitching red void, a shadowy figure stood in tense silence as scarlet feathers began to flutter ominously down around him. Consumed by a tempest of chaotic energy, a furious voice seethed from a glowing-eyed figure, venomously branding their target a worthless fool. In a fractured void of red and black, a pair of tormented blue eyes stared out from the darkness as a disembodied voice cruelly declared that he never should have been born. In the encroaching darkness, a lone figure emerged, his face a canvas of fresh wounds and an old, angular scar. His gaze fixed forward with grim determination. Blood streaked from a fresh wound above his eye, yet the man's expression remained a mask of pure, unyielding intensity. A mysterious, bespectacled man was suddenly engulfed in a torrent of golden energy, his movement frozen by an unseen force as he wondered in alarm if this was his father's doing. A thunderous crackle of golden energy shattered the silence of a desolate wasteland as two figures violently clashed, their epic confrontation watched by a silent observer from high above. A sudden surge of crackling energy forced a hooded figure to flinch back in shock, the raw power erupting uncontrollably around them. Continuing to radiate immense power, the large figure began to quiver uncontrollably as a smaller, dark-haired individual watched its every twitch with an unwavering gaze. In the shadows, a hooded figure with dark glasses failed to stifle a sinister cackle, their hand barely concealing a triumphant smirk. As the sinister laughter exploded into a mad roar, a grin-faced warrior with a sword on his back stood defiantly against the overwhelming sound. Exhaling in grim amusement, a bespectacled man raised his hand, his unsettling grin widening as yellow lightning crackled to life around him. In a flash of crackling yellow energy, a hooded figure grinned maniacally, declaring with delight that his opponent was as sharp as ever, the very quality he loved about them. Against a stark, blood-red void, a young swordsman, his face etched with scars and a blade resting on his back, cast his gaze downward in a moment of intense, brooding contemplation. Elsewhere, a far more sinister presence emerged from the darkness. A man in a tailored suit accompanied by a woman whose chilling smile twisted as she clung to his arm. Blood dripped from a fresh wound as a mysterious man, his eyes hidden by dark hair, emerged from a crimson haze with a single demanding question. The answer to his question seemed to lie in a different, sterile room, where a still figure rested shrouded in white across a cold, metallic slab. In the cold isolation of a desolate corridor, a young man with dark green hair was completely overcome by despair, his silent sobs shaking his entire frame. A question about a job from 5 years ago sent his mind reeling back to a bitter winter, revealing the blood-stained face of a warrior whose glowing orange eyes held the weight of that cold memory. Bathed in the electric glow of a vibrant yellow background, a mysterious man in a hooded jacket and glowing glasses smiled with challenging confidence, admitting he was genuinely surprised Bob had understood the trick. As raw energy crackled around a menacing figure in a hoodie and glasses, he smiled, admitting he was impressed by the resilience reflected in his victim's terrified, blood-splattered eye. Amid the brutal aftermath of a recent clash, a defiant figure looked on with a menacing smirk as blood trickled from a fresh, cross-shaped wound that marred their face. Taking a cautious step from the oppressive darkness onto a patch of illuminated, gritty ground, an apprehensive figure confessed that the unfolding situation was completely over their head. As golden energy crackled around a sinister, hooded figure, a dark thought surfaced. This so-called father, having already disposed of his wife, was now coming for his son. The battle culminated in a single, desperate moment as a blood-spattered warrior erupted with a blinding wave of golden power. From within a maelstrom of crackling golden energy, a sinister hooded figure emerged, extending a hand charged with power as he mockingly questioned if others shared his view of the unfolding tragedy. Breathed in golden energy, a confident man grinned up at the colossal descending fist, accepting the overwhelming reality of the moment for what it was. The scene opened on the grim face of a wounded man, his cross-shaped scar weaving blood against a fiery orange sky as he bid a final farewell to Jaehyun. The chaos of battle faded into the background, focusing on a warrior whose blood-streaked face was a mask of grim resolve, marked by a fresh cross-shaped wound by his eye. The tense quiet of the aftermath was broken only by a rising murmur as a blood-spattered, partially masked man stared downward in somber contemplation. Within the silent expanse of a digital realm, an intense starburst of red-orange light suddenly ignited with a sharp electric buzz, shattering the tranquil blue grid. It began with a deafening hiss and a brilliant flash as a central disk of pure energy erupted within a storm of chaotic blue data. Amidst a crackling storm of electrical energy, a confident man in a hoodie and glasses mockingly asked if his foe had any last words before unleashing a devastating surge of power. The tense silence was shattered by a sharp snap as a hand pulled away the glasses, revealing a pair of eyes wide with utter shock. From a silent vantage point, a lone figure stood transfixed as a brilliant, roaring wave of golden energy completely engulfed a distant silhouette on the horizon. A sudden surge of immense golden mana crackled violently, causing a startled man in glasses to question the unbelievable power radiating around him. With a destructive crack, a powerful armored limb descended, shattering the brightly glowing golden ground beneath it. Amidst a chaotic whirlwind of debris, a wounded, dark-haired swordsman stood his ground as a cataclysmic burst of golden energy erupted from his very being. The first sign of chaos was a blinding surge of golden mana, an impossible phenomenon that left a spectacled young man utterly bewildered as he watched its power grow without limit. Bathed in a sudden golden glow, he swallowed hard, the sweat on his face betraying his urgent realization that this situation had become too dangerous and needed to end now. As a massive golden weapon crackled into existence behind him, a serious young man with glasses extended his hand and menacingly declared that playtime was over. The darkness was shattered in an instant as a brilliant streak of crackling golden energy tore through the void. In a blinding flash, a deafening slash of golden energy erupted from the darkness, completely engulfing the lone figure at its epicenter. Amidst a deafening roar of crackling lightning and surging golden energy, a lone warrior stood at the heart of the storm. The air itself seemed to split apart as a dark-haired warrior, his face a mask of fierce determination, ignited his sword in a blinding surge of golden lightning. It began with a cataclysmic explosion of golden light, at the heart of which a single, searing yellow eye opened with terrifying intensity. With a thunderous crash, a lone figure erupted in a blinding flash of golden energy, becoming the defiant epicenter of a world-shattering cataclysm. It began in a maelstrom of fire, where a young man with glasses stood frozen, his horrified expression illuminated by the glowing embers swirling around him. In a maelstrom of golden energy, a dark-haired man appeared, his forehead bloodied and a glowing red mark on his cheek, while his yellow eyes blazed with immense power. In a crackle of digital static, a system notification confirmed the successful equipping of Odin's lost eye, an item that immediately became irrevocably soulbound to its new wielder. From within a maelstrom of fiery energy, a blood-streaked figure with glowing yellow eyes offered a cruel smirk, expressing mock disappointment that he could no longer pawn his opponent off. The digital world shuddered as a glowing interface cut through the static, its buzzing alert announcing an unprecedented opportunity. A blank card was now available for use. The silence was shattered by a desperate roar of disbelief as an unknown man, his face slick with sweat, rejected the unfolding reality as utterly impossible. As the world dissolved into a blinding orange glare, a young man with glasses could only watch in utter disbelief, his mind screaming with the impossible question of how anyone could simply disperse magic. The silence of a fractured golden world is shattered by a thunderous stomp as an armored boot descends with immense force and sends glowing fragments flying. In the aftermath of a fierce battle, a lone injured man erupted in a brilliant golden aura as he cried out in desperation for human. Amidst a dark void, a digital chime and a fizzle of static announced the activation of the formidable ability, Odin's Lost Eye, which immediately consumed a blank card to power its effect. The scene erupts in a fiery orange aura, revealing a furious man whose glowing eyes burned with malice as he vowed to inflict the most excruciating death imaginable. As a surge of brilliant energy erupted from his foe, a system notification flashed in his vision, confirming the successful duplication of the active skill, Chains of Shocks. It began with a blinding release of raw power, as crimson and gold lightning tore through the air with a visceral crackle. The air itself crackled as a figure erupted in a blinding torrent of orange energy, overwhelming their opponent with spinning, incandescent constructs. The world erupted into a fiery orange haze as a man in glasses stumbled back, his mind reeling as he questioned how anyone could possibly use the Chains of Shock. As crackling golden energy erupted around the scarred man, he reeled in disbelief, questioning how a mere D-rank brawler could so effortlessly master a magic that had taken him years to perfect. Gritting his teeth, he dismissed the advanced magic as a mere trick, vowing through a defiant glare that it would never be enough to defeat him as his own golden energy intensified. With a hesitant thought forming on his lips, a dark-haired man marked by glowing red sigils was suddenly engulfed in a blinding torrent of crackling power. The scene ignited with an unseen speaker's declaration that they would just have to see, unleashing a cataclysmic burst of raw power that consumed the world in a fiery roar. In a blinding flash of crackling energy, a man with glasses was violently consumed by the powerful blast, his pained cry lost in the overwhelming surge. The weapon responsible for the surge slammed down with a deafening metallic screech, its luminous form erupting in a shower of sparks and crackling energy upon impact. Without warning, a deafening explosion of golden light tore through the earth, sending a bespectacled man hurtling backward through the air. The explosive golden energy emanated from a dark-haired man with a facial scar, whose single eye burned with immense power as he fixed his gaze sideways. The air shattered with a deafening boom as a young man in glasses and a hoodie lunged forward, enveloped in a storm of golden energy and crackling lightning. That storm of golden energy crackled violently as he compressed it into a single, blinding orb held within his palm. The confrontation began with a cataclysmic roar as a blinding flare of energy descended from an unseen assailant, engulfing their target below in a torrent of fire. A sharp clonk cut through the roar of the flames as the blood-stained man's eyes blazed yellow, a holographic interface confirming the activation of his skill, Absolute Calculation. It began with the deafening clatter of shattering restraints as a violent surge of golden energy erupted, tearing the very air apart with a sizzling roar. From the chaos, a lone figure watched the golden energy screech and clatter, violently shattering and reforming into a colossal, glowing construct. It began with a surge of raw fury as a man in glasses tore through the darkness, his arm blurring in a swift motion as he let out a venomous curse for his adversary. His curse manifested in a swirling vortex of glowing blue runes that enveloped him, exploding in a brilliant flash of power with a thunderous whoom. In the wake of a sudden impact, a blood-spattered figure's face filled the view, one eye igniting with a malevolent golden light as an ethereal smoke began to coil around him. Surrounded by the crackling sounds of a world being deconstructed, a young man with glasses initiated the absolute calculation skill, his outstretched hand glowing as one eye worked into a reptilian slit. The air itself seemed to crackle with immense power as a divine weapon, a spear forged from pure golden lightning, manifested in a blinding, brilliant glow. Engulfed by its blinding radiance, he knew with grim certainty that this was an attack he could not possibly dodge. The world was torn asunder in a deafening explosion, silhouetting a lone figure against a blinding flash of fire and lightning. This cataclysmic force spiraled into a vortex of raw power, violently hurling superheated debris in every direction. Under the eerie glow of a shattered sky, a solitary armored figure trudged onward through a desolate landscape of floating chaos. The struggle began with a desperate, pained gasp as a hand reached for shattered glasses on the ground, only for a heavy foot to slam down beside them, asserting cruel dominance. Amidst the wreckage of a recent battle, a grievously wounded man collapsed to the ground, coughing blood as the armored foot of his unseen conqueror loomed over him. In the violent aftermath of a brutal clash, a bloodied man gasped for breath, his tear-streaked face contorted in a desperate plea for his life to be spared. Surrounded by an inferno of golden energy, the blood-stained man's eyes glowed fiercely as he drove his blade-like construct home with a sickening shunk. A sickening spatter of blood was the only sound to break the stillness, staining the textured wall in a brutal, crimson explosion. In the intense silence, a mysterious figure emerged into view, their face a mask of neutrality despite the fresh streak of blood on their forehead and the faint, ethereal glow emanating from their neck. As blood trickled from his mouth, a man with fiery orange eyes stared into the shimmering abyss, daring to hope that it was finally over. With a final, sickening flop, a severely injured civilian collapsed onto the desolate, rocky ground, his blood staining the earth as an incapacitated, dark-clad figure floated motionlessly above. It began with a chilling sight. A young man, his face streaked with blood, whose subtle, sinister smile was utterly eclipsed by the malevolent glow of his single orange eye. Drained of all stamina and mana, the warrior's consciousness began to fade, his blood-splattered face a mask of despair at the cruel irony of dying just after obtaining a mythic item. In a void of stark white, a disappointed voice confessed to being fooled, lamenting the mistaken belief that Lady Luck had been with him today. The world shattered into a crimson splash against the encroaching darkness, leaving only the cold, hard finality of death. He now floated alone in that dark emptiness, reflecting that while he had faced the concept of death countless times as a raider, the first-hand experience felt profoundly different. The world began to fade into a blur of crimson through a blood-splattered eye, the only remaining sensation being an overwhelming cold. The battle's grim conclusion was etched upon a single face, its features obscured by a mask of blood and deep cuts. With a sudden chime, a glowing blue interface materialized in the darkness, announcing the successful download of a new operating system. Amidst a storm of digital corruption, a blood-splattered face materialized with a single glowing orange eye, ominously asking if its viewer was ready to run the program. A single sharp chime announced a revelation on a glowing blue screen. A new operating system offered the power to travel back to the most desired point in one's past. In a moment of sheer desperation, a grievously wounded man stared into the abyss with glowing orange eyes, wondering if this unbelievable offer to return to the past was truly a chance to save himself. A system notification materialized, outlining its core function: the ability to send the user back to their most desired point in the past before a new, ominous message declared the arrival of an unforeseen variable. The journey began with a single, uncertain thought echoing in the void, questioning if the end of this long path would bring boon or bane. Despite his grievous injuries, a bloodied man stared forward with defiant resolve and gave the order to run it. In the blink of an eye, a face half-shrouded in darkness ignited with a single, blazing orange light, signaling a grim acceptance that this was the only option remaining. From the enveloping darkness, a face emerged, its intense eyes and confident smirk suggesting a meticulously crafted plan was already unfolding. Resigned to his fate, he came to the stark realization that he had nothing left to lose. Amidst a cascade of red and blue glitches, a digital interface whirred to life, announcing the urgent initiation of a new operating system called Nornir. The system's activation then gave rise to a mysterious, glowing sphere, its core of 5 empty chromatic squares hovering silently above an intense source of golden light. From a void of pure, blinding light, 3 divine and mysterious figures emerged, their eyes bound and their halos shimmering with an immense, silent power. Following their silent arrival, a single name blazed into existence against the cosmic darkness, its runic letters identifying the presence of the Farst Helm. In a burst of golden energy, a mysterious blindfolded woman with long red hair appeared, her slight smile hinting at a power that whispered through the void. The hinted-at power then erupted into a brilliant golden aura, so overwhelming that it shimmered through the air and bleached her hair a radiant blonde as her enigmatic smile deepened. From the heart of a radiant golden light, a blindfolded woman with flowing white hair emerged, a faint smile on her lips as she powerfully invoked the name Thatarm. Amidst a crackling surge of golden power, a mysterious blindfolded woman emerged with an unsettling smile, extending her hand as if offering a dangerous invitation. In a void of pure white, a mysterious, speckled orb materialized, glowing with ancient power as cryptic words echoed from its radiant core. The cryptic words from the orb then solidified into a series of stark, red-orange alerts, announcing that he had not only become an arch-enemy of the Great Aesir, but had also been granted two powerful, godlike skills. In a flash of ominous red, a system alert chimed with a chilling message, warning an unseen player that the opposing gods of Aesir were now watching his every move. That chilling warning manifested as a physical shock, causing a young man's heart to pound as his bright orange eyes snapped open in sudden terror. In the quiet of a dimly lit room, a dark-haired young man with striking orange eyes suddenly jolted upright in bed, his expression a mask of pure shock. His startled gaze immediately shot towards the source of the disturbance, his initial shock twisting into a look of concern. It began in the quiet solitude of an office, where a sudden, brilliant light erupted beside a desk, prompting a gasp of utter disbelief. In the sudden stillness, a warm light settled on a framed photograph of a smiling couple, its peaceful memory a stark contrast to the disoriented question of what had just happened. With a soft whisper of power, a dark-haired man stared in intrigued surprise as a brilliant golden light began to radiate from his own hands. In a moment of pure hope, a pair of open hands reached upward, drawn toward the promise held within an ethereal, all-encompassing light. With an electric crackle, two hands summoned a sphere of intense, fiery energy, its power radiating outwards in flickering red particles. Those flickering particles then swirled into a triumphant confirmation, announcing that the user had been successfully transported back in time to the desired period. As a blinding light began to tear through the dark sky, the moment was captured in a pair of wide, intense orange eyes where a single bead of sweat traced the edge of unspoken tension. The mind behind those eyes struggled to comprehend the sight, desperately wondering if what was unfolding before him was merely a dream. Disoriented by flashing, distorted images of a past trauma, a figure's mind fractured with the single disbelieving thought of having somehow returned to the past. The sheer impossibility of it all forced his fracturing mind to grasp at the only rationalization it could find, that this was all just a dream. The world seemed to fracture before the horrified gaze of a young man, his orange eyes igniting with a sudden, uncontrolled power. Within that cataclysm, a single, cherished memory surfaced. A man and woman linked arm in arm, sharing a gentle, affectionate smile. The story begins in a room bathed in a warm, ethereal glow, where a poised woman with long blonde hair and a confident smile signaled the start of a momentous occasion. Yet, the confidence of this grand beginning was immediately shattered by the intrusion of a dark, fragmented memory of a dream that could never be. The scene opened on a woman with striking orange eyes, her light brown hair tied back as a subtle, confident smile played on her lips. Suddenly, the scene cut to a close-up of a face bathed in a harsh yellow light, its features contorted in pure agony. The tranquility of the moment was broken as unseen arms wrapped around the startled individual, whose wide orange eyes were a mirror of their shock. Held tightly in the comforting embrace, their shock finally gave way to a wave of overwhelming distress and tears. It was a somber dream, the kind of fleeting peace a person never wanted to wake up from. It began with a single violent throb from deep within his chest, a wave of pure agony crashing over the young man as he gasped for breath. A sharp chime pierced the air as a fragmented, glowing orange window materialized, its stark text declaring that all combat limitations were now removed. Pulled back from the precipice of death, a system notification chimed through his fading consciousness, announcing that 20% of his health had been successfully recovered. With heavy, ragged breaths and sweat dripping from his brow, a dark-haired man endured an unseen agony, his eyes glowing with a fiery orange intensity. A sudden, alarming disorientation washed over the young man, his orange eyes flaring with light as he gripped his chest by the window and wondered aloud if this was all just a dream. Waking in the familiar, sunlit bedroom of his past, the young man was jolted from his thoughts by a sudden system notification announcing the automatic start of a new quest. As he clung to consciousness after miraculously surviving a near-fatal encounter, a system notification suddenly flashed before him, issuing an urgent subquest that tasked him with the simple act of resting to recover his health in exchange for a reward. Bathed in the ethereal glow of a system interface, A dark-haired man's crimson eyes widened in disbelief as a notification for a quest suddenly appeared before him. A single bead of sweat rolled down his temple as the dark-haired youth finally allowed himself to breathe, the tension of the last few moments escaping in a heavy sigh of relief. On a desolate battlefield strewn with rock and blood, the lone victor stood over Uman's fallen form, ready to begin his story by clarifying that their clash had not been his end. The moment erupted in a visceral close-up, a face twisted in pained disbelief as blood streamed from their eyes and mouth, their minds screaming the impossible question of how this could be happening. It began with an enigmatic system prompt materializing from a digital void, revealing an unbelievable function. Installing the new operating system would send its user hurtling back in time to their most desired moment. In a void of pure darkness, a voice confessed the impossible consequence of a past event. They had been sent back in time. With a hand extended toward a glowing, blocky interface, the raider drew upon the mental fortitude forged in his battles against Yggdrasil, knowing from past experiences that this uncanny event was just another challenge to overcome. As shimmering red energy coalesced around his outstretched hand, a young man with intense, glowing orange eyes explained that true strength lay in the ability to quickly assess and adapt to any situation at hand. Putting his own advice into immediate practice, he brought a hand to his chin in contemplation, calculating that the UI's date had sent him 11 years into the past, back to his third year of middle school. From the digital ether, a mysterious presence emerged, its arrival heralded only by a pair of intense, glowing orange-red eyes that flickered with an unsettling glitch. The glitch culminated in a triumphant chime, as a notification confirmed the old OS had been successfully replaced by the Nornir system. The day began not with a jolt, but with a quiet moment of contemplation as an unseen figure sat at the edge of their bed, pondering if the name Nornir belonged to the new system. That sense of unreality extended beyond just the system, as they admitted to themselves that the entire act of time travel still felt like a distant dream. In a quiet, book-lined study, a lone figure stood in deep contemplation until a silent, powerful command cut through the stillness, bidding him to rise. In response to the command, his hand seized the November calendar as a cunning smile crossed his features, certain of at least one outcome. It all began with a single, determined note jotted down in a planner, mapping out a future at Mills Academy with an emphatic instruction to choose the path of a brawler. With that future now written, the pen slid back into its holder with a decisive clack, finalizing the first step of this new path. In the quiet secrecy of the morning, an unknown hand laid out instructions for a Mills Academy application, only to pause and decisively scratch out a revealing postscript directing the applicant to become a brawler. The story reignited in a moment of stark clarity, with the determined realization that an invaluable second opportunity had been given. A young man with striking orange eyes smirked confidently, pen in hand, as he declared with absolute certainty that he would not make the same mistake again. That certainty was forged into a single, resolute goal: he would become a mage in this life. In a moment of quiet anticipation, a dark-haired figure opened their mouth for the first bite of rice held delicately by chopsticks. They took the first bite with an appreciative sound, the motion drawing attention to the distinctly green hand holding the chopsticks. In the midst of a seemingly calm meal, a sudden choke seized the figure with striking orange eyes, their expression twisting into one of profound distress as they clutched their chopsticks. The only sound in the tense room was the quiet sniffling of a distressed woman, her tear-filled eyes fixed on the figure before her who held a pen poised to sign. In the soft light of the kitchen, a woman's meal was forgotten as she paused, her pensive expression revealing her concern as she wondered what could be eating away at him lately. The quiet moment was shattered when a dark-haired figure suddenly wrapped their arms around the blonde woman from behind, her body tensing in shock at the unexpected embrace. A gentle patting on her back accompanied the sudden embrace from behind, a tender gesture that left her stunned as she recalled how this man, always so aloof, had just been bawling in front of her. In a moment of charged silence, a thin object landed on the table with a decisive plonk, a clear summons for Jaehyun. In the quiet space between them at a table, a woman's worried inquiry about recent events was met with a faint, evasive smile from the man, who dismissed her concern as the lingering effect of a simple nightmare. Poised above a dark surface, a hand holding a slender instrument paused as its owner confirmed the grim nature of the tale being told. It was, without a doubt, a nightmare. The source of this nightmare was soon revealed in the eerie, sepia-toned light, a still, sheet-draped figure lying on the slab before him. It began with a surge of raw power, manifesting in the shadows as a pair of eyes ignited with an intense, smoldering orange glow. A knowing smile graced the features of a woman with warm amber eyes as she listened to her child broach a topic she had long been anticipating. In a moment of quiet scrutiny, a thoughtful golden eye revealed its owner's inner speculation on whether the young man was feeling the expected apprehension about applying to Millis. As a serious young man with striking orange eyes gazed thoughtfully into the distance, he solemnly reflected on the perilous life of a raider, a path made even more daunting by the Academy's notoriously cutthroat competition. The scene opens in a moment of profound serenity, a soft, ethereal light tracing the features of a figure with closed eyes, lost in the quiet of their own world. It began with a solemn declaration from an unseen authority who considered allowing the boy to set aside the difficult path of mills and apply to a regular school if he was not up to the challenge. In a moment of quiet resolve, a young man with dark hair and striking yellow eyes announced his decision, explaining that a school's prestige was meaningless if his heart wasn't in it, and that he was therefore switching his major to magic. In a moment of quiet accord, a woman with light brown hair closed her eyes with a gentle smile, readily agreeing to the proposal. An unspoken tension filled the space between the dark-haired man and the brown-haired woman, her expression suddenly breaking into one of pure confusion. A look of stunned disbelief crossed the man's face as he pondered the sudden, uncharacteristic decision of the boy who had spent his entire life dreaming of becoming a brawler. It began in a moment of quiet contemplation, the camera close on a figure whose thoughts remained as hidden as their face, which was turned pensively to the side. The moment began with a sudden brush of a hand, revealing an intense orange eye that burned with an unknown purpose. Impressed, his mother gently touched his cheek with a subtle smile, remarking on the considerable thought he had clearly invested, and he confirmed that it was indeed a great deal. With a gentle smile that warmed her distinctive orange eyes, a supportive woman gave Jaehyun her blessing, telling him to do as he wished and pursue his dreams rather than wealth. Her voice then choked with emotion as she vowed to always support him, whether it involved magic or anything else, her vulnerable expression being met by a hand gently cupping her face. As a dark-haired individual struggled to suppress their grief, a companion reached out with a steady hand, conveying a firm resolve that now was not the time to cry. Their shared determination was shattered by the arrival of a shadowy figure wreathed in a sinister purple aura, a man the companion grimly identified as Song Wo-min. A singular, burning ambition cut through the darkness, fueled by a deep-seated desire for revenge against the A-rank raider he called father. It began with a burning resolve, reflected in a single orange eye, as its owner silently vowed that he must become stronger than he was now. A resonant chime shattered the quiet stillness, as a glowing system window announced that the quest for a good rest had been successfully completed. As beads of sweat dripped to the floor from his intensely focused form, a shirtless man held a grueling handstand when a system notification suddenly chimed, rewarding his completed quest with a blank card. In the quiet aftermath of a completed quest, a muscular warrior hunched over in exhaustion, his satisfaction tempered by the familiar sight of yet another blank card as his reward. Fresh from a shower, a powerful man reviewed his strategy on glowing holographic screens, confident that while the Nornir system remained a mystery, the situation was already heavily in his favor. From the silence of a blank canvas, a confident voice laid out its ultimate strategy, boasting of its knowledge of the future, of hidden pieces, and of ruins it alone could monopolize. In the solitude of his study, a dark-haired man recalled the past, his dependable memory, the very asset that had once made him an effective dungeon guide. His hands slid across the desk, his focus shifting from that past identity to a glaring present-day problem. His current skills, with few exceptions, were those of a simple brawler. Dropping into a chair with a soft thud, a young man with striking orange eyes began to reflect on a time when he was hell-bent on getting in as a brawler. The memory of that past ambition prompted a heavy sigh as he gazed aside, wondering if there was anything he could possibly do now. As a column of reddish-orange energy crackled into existence, a young man with dark hair watched intently, his orange eyes alight with the thought that this was truly intriguing. In a moment of quiet reflection, a crimson interface shimmered into view, presenting 16-year-old Jaehyun Min with a stark summary of his current power and the untapped potential held within 21 available points. Awakening to a cascade of system notifications, the red-eyed swordsman analyzed the glowing panel before him, discovering with a mix of confusion and intrigue that while his level had been reverted, his passive skills had been mysteriously preserved and even enhanced. A sudden chime echoed in the void as a system message revealed an incredible power. His skills would carry over upon returning to the past, prompting him to question the mysterious effect known as the scrutiny of the gods. In a flash of ethereal light, a system notification detailed the passive skill Scrutiny of the Gods, leaving its new owner stunned as he realized its impossibly powerful effect of granting a global stat point with every single level. In a moment of quiet contemplation, a black-haired man with striking orange eyes considered the watchful gaze of the Acer-opposed gods, ultimately deciding his first priority was to peruse the skills now glowing faintly in his hand. It began with a blinding flash of insight as a new power materialized before him. the EX-ranked passive skill, Eye of the Absolute God, which granted the wielder the ability to pierce through all illusions and perceive the absolute truth. A glowing interface materialized in the air, detailing a formidable A-rank active skill known as Chains of Shock, an electrified attack with the power to paralyze its victim. In the quiet glow of a holographic display, a lone figure reviewed his newly acquired skills, finding the name Eye of the Absolute God somewhat ambiguous but remaining confident that Chains of Shock was a good acquisition. Deciding to check his progress, 16-year-old Jaehyun Min was greeted by a brilliant flash as his character stats materialized before him, revealing a surprising aptitude for magic and a wealth of unspent points. In the quiet solitude of a new beginning, a young man with determined red eyes gazed at a holographic status window, carefully planning his future as a mage by investing points into magic and agility for the battles to come. An intense look sharpened in his eye as a series of notifications suddenly announced a surprising surge in his power, granting him new heights of agility, magic, and endurance. The lesson began with a core principle, explaining that while other stats directly increased attack power, the true king of them all was endurance, which crucially staved off the fatigue brought on by highly repetitive maneuvers. Satisfied that the stat would pay dividends later, he completed the allocation with a flash of light, his thoughts already shifting to the more immediate decision of what new skill to learn. In a moment of focused contemplation, he took stock of his offensive skills, acknowledging that with his current mana reserves, he would have to rely on his Chains of Shocks for the time being. Lost in quiet contemplation, a figure twirled an ornate dark card, concluding that healing magic was logically the best choice to make. In the somber raider world of 2020, a time when powerful brawlers were revered, mages were cast aside as the unfortunate dregs of society. A solemn voice began its explanation with a crucial caveat, its words materializing alongside a vision of an ethereal figure bathed in golden light, revealing that raiders with healing magic were treated in a manner set apart from all others. As a voice explained why people naturally gravitate toward the healer class, a path guaranteeing a royal welcome and purpose beyond the battlefield. A silhouetted figure manifested this allure, glowing with an immense, fiery energy against the light. This allure solidified into a determined strategy for a dark-haired man with striking orange eyes, who concluded while examining a dark card that a solid healing skill in his repertoire would guarantee no one could ever blackball him. In a quiet room, a dark-haired man leaned back with a sigh of relief, the chair squeaking beneath him as his expression shifted to one of deep contemplation. A single, foreboding thought cut through the silence, warning that encountering an awakened with a decent healing skill would prove troublesome. In a moment charged with building tension, a figure with striking orange eyes stared intently upwards, his expression a mask of pure anticipation. Bathed in a menacing golden aura, a young man in glasses resolved that while his fight against Umin had been a necessity, from this point forward, he would use his powerful blank cards with much greater discretion. In another place, a profound sense of peace settled over a young man with dark, spiky hair, his eyes closed in quiet repose. Shrouded in a moment of deep contemplation, he reasoned that while there was no way to predict how many cards the system would grant, it was safe to assume such a powerful item would not be given in droves. A moment of anxious contemplation over what to do was abruptly shattered by the insistent buzzing of a phone on the desk. In a moment of quiet contemplation, a dark-haired figure with striking orange eyes was drawn back to reality by the insistent buzz of a glowing device on their desk, prompting them to wonder who could possibly be trying to reach them. In a moment of quiet contemplation, a young man with striking orange eyes focused intently on his phone, the screen flashing as he swiftly scrolled through its contents. An unknown figure flinched as the name Yoo-jung Kim lit up their phone screen, their eyes burning a furious red as they breathed out the name in a pained whisper. Lost in a nostalgic memory, he recalled his childhood with Yoo Jae-jung, a time when they were inseparable neighbors who nurtured a shared dream of becoming raiders at Milla's. The prevailing mood was shattered, however, by the sudden appearance of a smugly smiling blonde woman with striking yellow eyes, whose playful peace sign belied an ominous new development. The world erupted in a violent spray of blood and debris as a shadowy figure held the grievously wounded orange-haired man in a desperate, unyielding grip. Amidst the unseen chaos, a grief-stricken young man with blood on his face collapsed into a desperate embrace, tears of loss streaming down his cheeks. Without warning, a wave of agony crashed over the spiky-haired man, forcing him to wince and clutch his face as sweat beaded on his skin. A weary sigh escaped them, yet their expression hardened with resolve as a single tear fell, convinced that this time they could change it. As his phone buzzed, a dark-haired man with glowing orange eyes smiled with cunning satisfaction, thinking that while she was just as he remembered, he absolutely had to change her destiny. A sudden barrage of frantic messages shattered the quiet, a friend pleading to see San Song Yun's lecture in the city, which triggered an abrupt and important memory for the startled recipient. In a sudden flash of realization, a mischievous smile spread across the face of the striking orange-eyed figure as they recalled the person they had completely forgotten. Bathed in a reverent golden halo that obscured her features, a mysterious figure appeared amid sparkling light, heralded only by the name Saint Chong Un Yu. From the encroaching darkness, a mysterious woman with obscured eyes cradled an orb of blinding power, the ominous culmination of her signature magic skill, sacrifice. In a study lined with towering bookshelves, a man rose from his desk with sudden resolve, realizing he could no longer afford to wait for such a monumental opportunity. In a moment charged with anticipation, a mysterious dark-haired figure smiled faintly, a soft whooshka breaking the silence as their hand moved to draw something from within their jacket. A door creaked open in a quiet home, where a young voice announced they were heading out for a bit, receiving a warm reply from their mother in the kitchen not to stay out too late. It began with the confident clatter of fingers on a screen, where a dark-haired young man with striking orange eyes worked with a knowing smile. The quiet of the moment was shattered by the glow of a phone screen, where a desperate plea was met with a swift, reassuring promise to be right there. The scene opened to a stark white void, where an unseen voice broke the silence to announce a briefing on the day's remaining schedule. With a powerful roar, a sleek black car sped through the city lights, its occupants en route to what one of them described as an outdoor motivational speech for raiders. Stealing a sideways glance, Min Jae-hyun listened as Kim Yo-jung rattled off her daunting schedule, which included a dungeon campaign in Seongbuk, a garrison inspection, and finally, a flight to the US. His face etched with worry, a man with a bandaged nose questioned if the woman was truly fit for the task ahead, pointing out that she looked even weaker than she had before. A woman with a white flower nestled in her long dark hair offered a gentle, reassuring smile. Her eyes closed as she insisted she was well, merely a little tired. A quiet moment was broken by a man with a bandaged cheek, his profile etched with concern as he remarked that his companion had been pushing himself far too hard these past few months. In a moment of suffocating tension, a man's face beaded with sweat as he glanced aside, conceding that the truth was already known. A refined woman with dark hair and an enigmatic smile appeared, delivering the foreboding news that the sacrifice was draining the user of their life energy. In a moment of quiet contemplation, a somber man in a suit was consumed by a single desperate thought: the need to find someone with healing magic as potent as sacrifice to fully restore a woman's weakened body. Bathed in the warm glow of a forgotten day, a woman's gentle smile held a silent weight as she reminded Songjae of a promise he was now breaking. A moment of charged silence was shattered by a sudden, vice-like grip, as one hand clamped down on another with palpable tension. Anxiety filled the car as a man in the passenger seat feared that at this rate, the Holy Lady of Korea wasn't going to make it, while a maid sat silently composed in the back. From the quiet interior of a vehicle, a woman with pensive green eyes watched the world pass by, her thoughts consumed by the ominous possibility that everything could collapse at any moment. Amidst the lively thrum of a crowded city street, a vibrant woman with orange hair turned back with a brilliant smile, eagerly telling her companion to hurry before the line grew any longer. Amidst a blur of hurried figures, a young man with dark hair and amber eyes was abruptly pulled along, his frustration clear as he told his unseen companion he understood and to stop, just before bumping into someone in the crowd. The day began with a playful energy as a confident young man with black hair led a surprised orange-haired woman through the bustling crowd, twirling her by the hand. With a confident smirk, a young man with dark hair and piercing orange eyes broke the tension, playfully accusing his companion of bringing him along solely out of fear of getting lost. As a brilliant light flared from their entangled hands, a distressed young woman with orange hair desperately tried to pull away, insisting it was all a misunderstanding and pleading to be let go. However, her pleas were met with an unyielding grip, the hand clutching her arm with a sudden, resolute force that refused to let her escape. The story begins in a moment of quiet intensity, as a young woman with vibrant orange hair and glowing eyes looks down, a shy blush revealing the powerful feelings she tries to hide. A smug young man shattered her quiet moment, first teasing her for getting lost so often and then, seeing her frustration, defensively boasting about what a rare opportunity he had given her with the lecture invitation. His orange eyes glowing with ambition, a dark-haired man smiled faintly as he agreed with her, realizing that copying Song-in's sacrifice would indeed be a tremendous asset. His ambition soared further as he scanned the murmuring crowd, realizing this opportunity could also introduce him to one of Korea's most well-connected individuals. Amidst the roaring crowd, a young woman erupted in a joyful cheer, her excitement a stark and sparkling contrast to the stony-faced man seated beside her. He remained impassive, his eyes flaring with an analytical orange light as a scan confirmed that Seong-yoon was undeniably a crowd puller. The day began with a momentous announcement, a large banner against a clear sky heralding a motivational speech by Song In-yu, the esteemed guildmaster of Korea's top guild, Yeonhwa. The sun glinted off the glass facade of a sleek, modern tower, where an enormous banner boldly declared an aspirational new purpose, saving people and the world through the power of healing magic. The world knew of Song In-yu, the guildmaster of Yeonhwa, a revered saint and top-level healer whose serene form now radiated a powerful, golden aura. His mind drifted back to a time when being a raider was not an accepted profession, recalling with admiration how she, a brightly smiling figure, had strived more than anyone to protect others. In a moment of charged anticipation, a figure's intense orange eyes fixated on a mysterious cylinder as it was tapped, suddenly springing to life with a resonant hum. A mysterious man with a piercing orange eye turned to face an unseen audience, formally greeting them and introducing himself as Song In-yu. Stepping onto the world stage, a confident woman with piercing green eyes grasped the microphone, ready to make an announcement that would change everything. In response, the crowd erupted with a deafening roar, their gaze shifting to a calm, dark-haired man now seated at the center of the stage. The air crackled with unspoken tension as a dark-haired young man with striking orange eyes stood resolute, his arms crossed in a display of silent, intense determination. His determination was fueled by a dark premonition of the future, a vision where, in 2 months, a dungeon campaign in Itaewon would leave Song-yoon in critical condition. The air grew tense as a solemn figure revealed the terrible irony of GMU's condition. Her own sacrificial healing magic was the very cause, leaving only one path to save her. Amidst a radiant glow of energy, a woman's cheerful shriek for Song-yoon to look her way was met with his immediate, annoyed demand for silence. As the world watched, a refined woman with dark, braided hair stepped before a microphone to deliver a grave address, announcing that their world was facing an age of unprecedented catastrophes. In a world scarred by darkness, a solitary figure stood cloaked against the light, her thoughts dwelling on the catastrophic loss of life brought forth by the emergence of Yggdrasil and the monsters that followed. In a hall filled with rapt attention, a young woman with vibrant orange hair listened as a voice recounted how their once dire situation had been transformed by the emergence of the Awakened and the advent of raiders. The broadcast began on a somber note, a woman at a podium delivering the grim reality that despite their successes, a mere fraction of the world's Awakened were becoming raiders, causing the death toll to soar to unprecedented heights. Against the vast, sunlit sky, a lone figure's eyes blazed with unwavering determination. Before a silent, unseen audience, a solemn woman stepped up to the microphone, her voice heavy with the urgent declaration that their world was at a critical juncture between life and death, with countless innocent lives being lost with each passing moment. On this momentous day, at the precise hour of reckoning, a hand clenched a microphone in a grip of pure resolve, its owner declaring that the one thing they all needed now was courage. It began with a single, passionate voice broadcast across the globe, as a determined young woman declared to all the Awakened that their courage could change the world. With a quiet swish of elegant robes, a mysterious figure bowed low in solemn supplication, pleading for them to become raiders and bring light to her world. As the declaration of support from the Yeonhwa Guild echoed through the air, the hopeful crowd, led by a smiling young man, burst into a chorus of exuberant cheers. The roar of applause washed over the grand hall, where a woman in an elegant gown stood serenely at the microphone, basking in the moment of appreciation. As the powerful words of the speech washed over the crowd, one orange-haired woman was so moved that she could only cover her mouth and weep, completely in awe of the speaker's gift. As the dark-haired man with striking orange eyes gave a pensive nod, he conceded the grim truth in her words. The brutal life of a frontline raider was a job few Awakened would ever choose. Lost in thought amidst a crowd, a young man scratched his head, remembering a time before his journey to the past when his grandest ambition was simply to sell a valuable item and secure a comfortable retirement. His quiet contemplation was broken by the cheerful, orange-haired woman at his side, who declared that Ha Song-yoon undoubtedly had what it took to be her role model, even if she wouldn't care in the slightest. With a sharp huff of irritation, a young woman with fiery orange hair demanded that her companion stop trying to get under her skin. Unmoved by her frustration, her companion abruptly announced he had to leave for an errand, prompting her to desperately question what she was supposed to do now. The tension finally snapped as the orange-haired woman glared with fury at her confused, dark-haired companion, berating him for getting them lost after he had promised he knew the way, and calling his failure mighty cheap. In a sudden shift from tension to teasing, a young man's sly grin met the girl's surprised expression as he revealed his prank. assuring her that he'd already called her mother and then casually asking about the urgency of her errand. The quiet moment was broken when the hooded, orange-eyed figure turned and nonchalantly announced a switch in their major to magic, prompting an immediate stunned reaction from their companion. His stunned reaction quickly shifted into a confident demand for her to teach him useful spells starting from the most basic theory, catching her completely off guard as she began to protest. As Jaehyun silently turned his back to leave, a frustrated voice cut through the air, desperately demanding to know why he had switched his major and was abandoning them. Staring after his retreating form with a look of pure disbelief, she finally accused him of just leaving her in the dust. Amidst the concrete canyons of the city, a young man with intense orange eyes paused his pursuit, certain his targets had fled in this direction as he began to scan the area for any trace of them. His search quickly found a point of interest, his eyes locking onto a dark-haired figure discreetly observing a man in a suit talking on the phone beside a sleek black car. A confident grin slowly spread across the man's face, a silent promise of the victory he already believed was his. The air grew heavy as a man in a crisp suit answered an urgent call, his serious expression reflecting the silent, imposing presence of the figure standing before him. The approach was met with immediate rejection as a stern man in a suit turned away, explaining dismissively that now was not a good time to accept a fan's gift. A young man with dark hair arrived with determined purpose, announcing through a confident, closed-eye smile that he had come to meet Guildmaster Yu. In a world weary of conflict, a man with a jagged scar over his eye sighed in frustration, his suspicious gaze fixed on the newcomer as he wondered if this was just another raider fiend. With a confident smirk, a dark-haired young man broke the quiet of their outdoor meeting, calling out to the older, suited man he identified as Lean. His confident greeting was immediately met by the cold irritation of another man who, despite acknowledging his fanaticism, sharply admonished him for barging in. A defiant young man with glowing orange eyes stood confidently against the city skyline, admitting his actions would trouble GMU but clarifying that his true purpose lay elsewhere. He then confronted the shocked, sweating man directly, revealing with a confident smile that he was fully aware of the woman's incurable disease. With a triumphant smirk, he revealed that he had the ability to cure her, a claim that twisted the other's expression into one of shocked distress. It began with a silent telling sign, a single bead of sweat rolling down the man's temple as a look of pained shock washed over his face. In a silent explosion of raw emotion, a man's face twisted into a mask of pure fury, his teeth grinding together with unshakable resolve. The sudden, intense glance of a dark-haired stranger cut through the silence, his piercing orange eyes conveying a silent, chilling warning. The afternoon calm of a bustling street was shattered when an irate woman turned on a young man in a green hoodie, warning the little punk to keep his voice down. Suddenly, the whir of an electric window cut through the tension as a woman with long, wavy hair appeared, urgently telling Sonjae to hold on. The tense standoff escalated as a man in a suit grabbed the younger man's hoodie, demanding to know if he could back up his words while a woman nearby averted her gaze. A dark-haired man with a confident smirk and glowing orange eyes snapped his fingers, declaring with pleasure that he could cure Guildmaster Yu of his illness. In a moment suspended from the world, a woman's profile was a portrait of pure serenity, her eyes gently closed in quiet contemplation. With an air of cold certainty, a figure with striking pale green eyes vowed that any deception would be immediately apparent. A dark-haired man with glowing orange eyes appeared, his confident smirk and casual gesture immediately suggesting he possessed a hidden, game-changing advantage. Anxiously checking the time, a man in a suit named Seonjae confirmed for the unseen Ms. Yu that they had a mere 2 hours before their next appointment. With an inviting smile, a woman with long brown hair beckoned him to get inside, proposing they go somewhere more private. Amidst a desolate white expanse, a voice suddenly rang out, filled with the chilling realization that they were dangerously exposed. In a room filled with quiet expectation, a dark-haired woman looked up from her armchair and politely gestured for the man standing before her to take a seat. In what appeared to be an interview, a polite young man with dark hair settled into the offered chair, quietly expressing his gratitude. A composed and authoritative figure filled the frame, their arms crossed as they began to dictate the proper order of things. With a mysterious smile gracing her lips, a woman with reddish-brown hair coolly inquired how her unseen companion could possibly be aware of her condition. In a quiet room, a mysterious man with intense orange eyes began to speak, cautiously apologizing for his secrecy while offering to reveal the nature of his information should the other party insist. In the soft light of the room, a woman with long dark hair offered a serene smile as she laid out the condition, explaining that they would forfeit her healing in doing so. With an amused, closed-eye smile, the woman touched her chin, remarking on her companion's spunk, before dismissively telling them to forget she had ever asked. With a resolute gaze from striking green eyes, The dark-haired figure announced that it was time to move on to the next task. In response, a dark-haired man with glowing orange eyes looked aside, contemplatively asking how exactly he was to be cured before beginning to formulate a frank answer. Stunned into silence, her eyes widened in disbelief as she struggled to question what she had just heard. A furious slam shattered the tense silence as a hand, clad in a formal suit, crashed down onto the wooden surface. The charged atmosphere of the room finally snapped as one furious man in a suit, his face a mask of rage, roared that they had heard enough of such nonsense. The tense silence shattered as a man in a suit aggressively confronted a seated, red-eyed figure, demanding to know how an amateur could possibly attempt to copy Ms. Yu's sacred inborn ability known as sacrifice. As ethereal blue figures materialized from swirling energy, a voice explained the mysterious nature of inborn skills, a power beyond S-class, attainable only through bloodline or a profound self-awakening. Within the world's intricate system of power, a fundamental truth separated the common from the elite. While standard skills could be calculated and learned, the rare inborn abilities remained an indecipherable secret monopolized by a select few. Lost in pensive thought, a young man with dark hair and striking crimson eyes gazed downward, conceding that he couldn't truly blame someone for adopting such a commonly held belief. With a self-assured glance from his distinct orange eyes, the dark-haired man dismissed the unfounded anger directed at him, stating he wouldn't have come at all if he couldn't deliver on his claim. In a room thick with tension, a woman with a knowing smirk calmly suggested to the furious Sonjay that they ought to give the boy a chance to explain himself. A woman sitting elegantly on the sofa then broke the silence following his explanation, her challenging smirk fixed in place as she questioned the logic of using her own sacrifice to heal herself. Gazing calmly to the side, a brown-haired man with intense orange eyes explained the harsh reality of their system, confirming that wounds from a skill's penalty could only be healed by another skill of equal or greater power. His gaze narrowed with grim determination as he revealed that Seongyun's ailment stemmed from an unbeatable inborn skill, a tier that even sacrifice couldn't heal, which made their current path the only surefire solution. In a moment of profound revelation, a serene figure bathed in divine light embodied the ultimate meaning behind Song-eun's skill, a solemn act of self-sacrifice offered to the gods. With a sly smirk, a woman sat composed on a couch as the fundamental contradiction of her sacrificial magic was revealed, a restriction that prohibited her from ever healing herself. The challenge hung in the air for a moment before the figure, their eyes shadowed by dark hair, finally conceded with a slow, cunning smirk. From a blinding flash of golden light, a serene and powerful woman emerged, her challenging gaze demanding proof. The tense silence was shattered by an alarmed cry as a man with a distressed expression urgently called out for Ms. Yu. A powerful surge of golden light erupted in a blinding flash, enveloping the lone woman who sat at the very heart of the storm. Bathed in a triumphant golden light, a cunning figure with fiery orange eyes savored the moment, confident that everything was unfolding exactly according to his plan. With a sudden zap, a mysterious hand began to dissolve, its form breaking apart into a cascade of glowing, square-like particles. In a blinding flash of energy, a mysterious hand revealed an intricately designed card, its surface pulsing with radiant light and geometric power. Following the intense trial, a sudden chime broke the quiet as a system window materialized before him, announcing that a new skill could now be learned. It began with a single, sharp chime as a glowing interface presented a fateful question, asking if he was prepared to register sacrifice onto a blank card. Amidst a cascade of shimmering golden light, a mysterious and powerful voice echoed with the undeniable command to register it. A mysterious woman smiled as a glowing orb formed in her hands, its light reflecting in her intense eyes while a system notification confirmed the successful registration of a sacrifice onto a blank card. The only clue to the mysterious figure's intentions was a confident smirk captured in a tight close-up. Sensing the lingering distrust from across the room, a confident young man with glowing orange eyes gestured from the couch, offering to provide a demonstration for their mutual benefit. A sharp chime suddenly echoed as a crimson system alert flared into existence, announcing the irreversible activation of the skill known as sacrifice. In a blinding flash of golden light, a powerful young man appeared with a confident smile, his glowing orange eyes fixed forward as immense energy radiated from his outstretched hand. The revelation struck with such force that the man in the suit and the woman beside him could only react with stunned, silent shock. With a surge of powerful determination, a fist clenched tight, erupting in a brilliant golden light as its wielder decided that the time to act was now. Extending the fist now bathed in shimmering golden light, his orange eyes glowed with confidence as he smirked and proposed it was time for negotiations to commence.